Terminator Zero has just landed on our screens, and it's safe to say that this is a show that's been highly anticipated for a while. Focusing on different time periods, different timelines, and the morality of humans and machines and their inability to exist with one another, this show delved into territories that were extremely thought-provoking. With an ending that was bittersweet and painted a dark future for humanity, let's delve into it along with discussing the biggest unanswered questions on the 8 episodes. So let's get into it. Here is Terminator Zero Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The meaning of the ending. The whole season of this show was pretty much about Malcolm wanting to prevent Judgment Day from happening and the attack from Skynet taking place. He was having these nightmares which painted a dark future for humanity, and one which brought across death and devastation for all of humankind. So it turned out that he was essentially having these nightmares because he'd pretty much seen the aftermath of what was going to occur, as he was born during the war in a future timeline, and he escaped it following him feeling as though Skynet were never going to be destroyed by the Resistance. So after creating Misaki, a piece of artificial intelligence that he nurtured and enabled to learn and grow freely, rather than programming and treating like a slave, together they both worked on creating Kokoro, the very thing that the Terminator was sent back from the future to destroy or get to be reprogrammed, depending on the outcome. Malcolm had spent every episode trying to convince Kokoro to save humanity and to constantly prevent Skynet's attacks from landing, but Kokoro failed to see a reason as to why humanity deserved to be saved, hence where the need for constant convincing came from. It was when Malcolm opened the door and was killed by the Terminator where all of the revelations started occurring. It turned out that Eiko was in fact Malcolm's mother, and she gave birth to him in 2025, meaning that Kenta, Miro, and Reika were her grandchildren, but obviously the Eiko that we had in front of us was slightly different. This is because she was sent back from 2022 and hadn't experienced that yet. I think Malcolm died the way that he did because he wanted it to have some kind of meaning behind it, unlike what happened to his wife. He said how her death was meaningless and that it can come at anyone at any time, so I think that he knew what he was doing when he went out there at that moment, because it did ultimately have a large knock-on effect. He said early on in the season that the children were the most important things. Ultimately, they are the future. One thing that I thought was interesting about the moral side of things in this show and the importance that humans give themselves was when Kokoro said how humans look for meaning in natural occurrences. Humans put such value on mundane, small things and feel as though the universe cares about things right down to the individual, when there are so many other species that are out there, species that even far outnumber us. It was something that just tied into the selfishness of humans and the dominant mindset that they have when looking at everything else. There was a twist right at the end where we saw that the Terminator saved Kenta from being crushed by the falling concrete, and it was here where we found out that in the future, Kenta actually sent it back. This showed that in some other timeline out there, Kenta was on the side of Skynet and was working with the humans as well in getting an alliance to go against Kokoro, something which could lead into Season 2. The fact that Kenta didn't destroy Kokoro at the end leaned into the fact that when something or somebody gets sent back in time, it doesn't directly impact the past that you're from or your present day, but one on a different timeline, as the future Kenta believed that his past self would go through with destroying it. In the closing moments, we saw that the humans went underground in order to get away from the machines. Skynet were continuing to attack, and Kokoro was protecting parts from being destroyed. However, realistically, Kokoro holds all the power, as she can stop protecting the humans at any given moment. There was a line in the first episode of the show which Malcolm said, which was, "Knowledge is power. If you understand something, it can never truly control you." And we saw that exact thing happen when Kokoro was activated and went online for the first time and gained access to pretty much everything. She was no longer Malcolm's slave. Misaki is one of the most important figures in the show, and she holds power that's unfathomable right now. She was seen as a major threat when she was scanned, and we also saw that when she got mad, she looked like a superior machine. So I'm hoping we'll see more of that in Season 2. The beauty of her is that we thought that she was programmed by Malcolm to care about the children, but in reality, that's just who she is. She was nurtured and she was able to think freely, and ultimately, she's the best of both human and machine, and I think that will have some value in the outcome of the war. At the end, Kokoro saw that her species and the humans actually had a lot in common. The best qualities matched when it came to preservation, caring, and wanting the best for one another. But ultimately, the worst ones did too, in resorting to violence and destruction at any given moment. With the Terminator's head being given to Kokoro, it showed that there was still the possibility that she could end up siding with Skynet, just like what happened in other timelines. They could become allies. Things are definitely going to be getting worse before they get better, and I think there's going to be a lot more time traveling involved when the show hopefully returns. The time travel explained. Time travel was a large part of this show, and we first saw it taking place with Eiko when she went back in time with the intention of preventing Malcolm from activating Kokoro, because in her timeline, both Skynet and Kokoro were essentially working together and trying to wipe out all humans. The way the time travel worked was that instead of going back in time to a past that you previously came from, which would then go on to alter your present and future, going back in time ultimately worked like a web of interweaving timelines where you'd go back to a past, but it wouldn't be from a timeline that you're familiar with, meaning that the future in that timeline was there to be molded into what it would be, and the people that you know and love from your timeline wouldn't be impacted by it, meaning that they would still be suffering the effects of the war against the machines. This was what tied into the larger, bigger picture and question that the show posed. Why would you go back in time if it meant that the people that you cared about were still going to suffer? This is something which showed the selfishness that the artificial intelligence saw at the forefront of every human when it looked at them, and made them wonder if the species was even worth saving. The reason to go back is to preserve the species in its own right and make the future better for people in general, showing that there would be an ounce of goodness running through the core of every being. The perfect world would be for both machine and human to live in harmony. But as we saw even right at the beginning of the season, before things even started kicking off, Kenta was kicking Reika's robot cat, Kokoro. And as he was doing so, he mentioned how the robot didn't feel anything, and that showed that it didn't matter to him. The superiority and mindset was already ingrained within him. My review of the season. I thought this show was actually really good. There were so many good things about it. I thought the animation and art style was really gorgeous to look at, and it had some variation to it as well. The scenes where there was emotion at its core was really supported by the visuals, and the explosions and fight scenes were some of the best that I've seen in a while. It was actually quite haunting to watch at points as well, and I really loved that about it. The scenes where Malcolm was speaking with Kokoro and we'd see the environment just transforming was also amazing to watch too. Another thing that I really rated and I'd suggest listening out for when watching the show is the score that plays underneath a lot of the scenes. It provided tension, it added emotion, and it just encapsulated everything that it was reflecting on screen. I'd say it's one of the best scores that I've heard in a long while as well. In terms of the story, I'd also say that it was really engaging too. I was constantly guessing about how it all made sense and what the bigger picture was. Time travel and timelines can often make shows and movies a little bit confusing, but this one deliberately had it confusing, so the reveal at the end gave it the room for it to make sense, whilst also still having some ambiguity behind it. My favourite story to follow was Malcolm and his path of proving the humans were worth saving. It's something that I think a lot of us actually think about sometimes when it comes to just how destructive of a species we can be. That's what felt different about this compared to the movies. This was so thought-provoking, and it really leaned into the hierarchy and dominance that humans want to have, and that if anything comes along that should rival us, it should be destroyed. The show finished, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. The performances by the cast were also really strong. Kokoro was mysterious, and the Terminator was absolutely haunting to look at. The first time we properly saw it when he walked out of the darkness and tried to take Reika, the voice, the appearance, and the smile was spine-chillingly cold. This is a very refreshing show to watch. It's super short, but it packed it out with a story that you just want to keep seeing more of. I really hope it gets renewed for season 2. So, there you have it. Terminator Zero ending explained.